Chris Carter, what is the key to this matchup tonight?
Can Green Bay get to Russell Wilson? Anytime you play against Seattle, he's always under pressure. There's only one season where he's been under more pressure than he's been under this year, even though he's on pace to have some of his best numbers ever. Can Green Bay, for one time in a big spot on the road, because one of the criticisms of Green Bay in this franchise, they don't support Aaron Rodgers, especially when they go on the road and in a playoff atmosphere. So can they get to Russell Wilson, and can they force turnovers? To me, because I know what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. I have a good feeling what I think the offense is going to do. But can they get after the quarterback? Because, Nick, you said it yesterday, a surprising thing. Last week you looked at it, Tennessee was #1 in defense. You look at sacks.
Green Bay sacks the opposing quarterback on a higher percentage of pass plays than any team in football, and Seattle allows sacks on a higher percentage of pass plays than any team in football. So we've heard about the immovable object, the irresistible force. This is the opposite. This is the immovable object and the super resistible force. This is one team's absolute strength going up against the other team's absolute weakness, which is why for Seattle it's so critical they get the run game going again like they did last week. I liked a lot what I saw from Rashad Penny last week. Now, Rashad Penny's a guy they drafted in the first round, and up until last week, they'd got nothing out of him. He was their third-string running back.
Yep, he's been struggling with injuries since the beginning. He's had a hard time transitioning into pro football.
Absolutely. But this was, a lot of people thought they overdrafted him. They saw something in him they liked, and then early in his career, he'd been injured and ineffective. Last week, he was pressed into service with Chris Carson being out, and he was outstanding. He had 120 yards. I want to see if they can keep that going, because the only way to keep Russell Wilson upright when you have a pass rush that is as underrated and as effective as Green Bay's and an offensive line that's as ineffective as Seattle's is if Green Bay has to worry about the running game. Is if they have to defend run first, pass second. Then, all of a sudden, Russell Wilson on the play action in particular can be effective. Then the Seattle passing game can be effective, because this Seattle team is a good story, and I give credit to the coach and the quarterback for keeping them afloat. But they haven't beat anybody all year. They got 4 wins against 4 bad football teams. Beating Green Bay would be far and away the best team they've beaten all year. They've been close twice against the Rams, close against the Bears. They've had some close games, but they don't have any quality wins yet.
All right, so we know how the Packers get to Russell Wilson, how they beat their team. We know what their weakness is. What's their strength? Is it the run game? How do they get to the Packers?
The strength of Seattle?
Yeah.
The strength of Seattle right now has been their running game. They're first in the National Football League, good in the red zone, top 5 team in the red zone. So also, Doug Baldwin, he's been hurt since the preseason. He's played in 7 games this year, but in doing interviews this week, he talked about this is the first time that his knee hadn't felt pain in it since the offseason. So look for him to be more productive. To think to Seattle with Russell Wilson, one of the top 5 quarterbacks that we typically talk about in the league, that they would be 27th in passing, that right there those numbers don't seem like they go together. So look for them to try to build on that number against the Pack tonight.
I want to talk about Rodgers for a moment, because when I was looking into this game, something jumped out at me as how can that be the case? So Rodgers has 17 touchdowns to only 1 interception. Right? So that's not shocking. I mean, that's even by Rodgers standards, that's low, but interception-wise, but it's not shocking. He's averaging nearly 8 yards per pass. That's a good number. He's right now 14th in the NFL in quarterback rating. So I'm like, hold on. He's throwing a lot of touchdowns. He's not throwing any picks. The reason he's so low in quarterback rating is he is 29th in completion percentage. The only quarterbacks in football that are completing a lower percentage of passes are C.J. Beathard, Josh Rosen, and Sam Darnold. Rodgers is ahead of only those guys. So I ask you this, C. Is that about his wide receivers? Is that about the young receivers not being on the same page? Because it's not like they are tops in the league in drops, so we can't just say guys have been dropping passes. But is that, when we talk about interceptions, 60% are on receivers, incompletions, has Rodgers not been as good as my eye tells me, or have his receivers not been where he thought they were going to be?
Well, one, it's a combination of 3 things. When you're playing with young guys, and he's had a lot of veterans around him through the years playing with, and he expressed some displeasure over some of the young guys they kept over keeping Jordy Nelson. So some of it's going to be that. Some of it's going to be the coaching staff getting used to the knee injury. He had a significant knee injury. How are we going to play with that knee injury? Because now him scrambling out of the pocket the way he used to do and be effective, he wasn't doing that the first part of the season. And the third part that I believe is, man, he's throwing the ball away. He realizes guys aren't open. I'm under duress. He's throwing the ball away at a higher rate than ever before. So those are the three components that have led to him being 27th as far as completion percentage.
Right.
Is that a bad thing, throwing the ball away, having the wherewithal to...
Tom Brady's doing the same thing. That's their way of trying to win. They're not going to throw a bunch of interceptions, and they realize you can throw the ball away in the NFL and still be very, very effective. They know that my guy can't get to this ball. I'm going to get rid of it. Forget the next. It's hard to continue driving, taking sacks.
Well,
so you would much rather them throwing the ball away than consuming all those sacks.
It's not just to avoid picks. It's the sacks. Like that, people need to recognize that drives where a team suffers a sack. I tried to look it up this weekend, actually. I was thinking about it. It's something I think greater than 75% of drives where there's a sack result in 0 points. I think it's close to somewhere in the 80s. Like, if you get sacked any point in the drive, the overwhelming odds are you're not coming away with any points on that drive. And so avoiding what we see from some of the young quarterbacks in football, and it gets magnified when they're in field goal range, but at any point in the field, is taking unnecessary sacks. Taking a sack that knocks you out of scoring range, taking a sack that's what, by the way, I thought Dak Prescott did on that end of the first half drive against Philly, where they took the sack and then all of a sudden Philly's calling their timeouts. They ended up overcoming it to score a touchdown on that drive. But Rodgers has been throwing the ball away, I think, to prevent sacks in a way that maybe in the past with a healthy knee, he thinks I can scramble away from this.
Yes.
In this situation, he hadn't been able to. But listen, for both of these teams, if they have any playoff hopes, they don't have to run the table the rest of the way. Both these teams have to have just one loss the rest of the way, right? So for both of them have to go 6-1 the rest of the way to have a shot at the playoffs. So I can't say this is a loser leaves town match where if you lose, your season's over. But whomever loses tonight, to be alive, would have to go undefeated the rest of the way, which for either one of these teams would be an incredible... Not easy at all. I favor the Packers tonight, but I think it should be a classic Packers-Seahawks game, which is very close come down to the end.
Really interesting, the fact that the percentage when you get sacked on that. I might have to look that up.
Okay. It's high 70s or low 80s.
And I got your word in there, too.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's
Packers Seahawks Thursday Night Football on Fox. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.